Here. I should just chuck something up on our Instagram, actually. There we go, we're live. I'll just do something here, then I'll intro it. All right, guys, we got a very special guest at the SCG here today. It's not Angus. It's the great Greig Picaver, a.k.a. HG Nelson.
Yeah, steady with the special. Just an ordinary guest who you roped in on your way here.
Yeah, true.
Hello, Oscar.
I found him at the gym, so
That's
anyway.
Right, found him at the gym.
Tune in on Twitch.
Can I point out that go and have a look at Oscar in action doing his chin-ups with my commentary. That's the bit that got us going.
That is the bit that got us going. But more importantly, tune into our Twitch now and enjoy the episode. All right. So, guys, now give it the formal intro. I think this is episode 148. Wish I waited around to episode 150 because that would have been a real milestone episode. But today we have an Australian sporting icon, a man that we all grew up watching or have watched our whole lives. I think my fondest memories of your work, HG, we have Greig Picaver here, a.k.a. HG Nelson, was the 2000 Olympics. But first, welcome to the show, mate.
Yes, thanks very much, Oscar. Tremendous to be at the SCG, tremendous to be on Twitch, and tremendous to be part of High Performance Podcast.
And you nailed
I
the
had
name.
hoped it would be High Maintenance Podcast, for those who know that pioneering online program. Are you familiar with High Maintenance? It was a terrific...
No, I've never heard of it.
An early adopter show where they try to adapt comedy to an online means of distribution, and dealt with a dope dealer who peddled his way round to the customers in New York City. They did turn it into a not-so-successful Netflix program, but it is really excellent work.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I don't even think it'll be dated at all because the characters themselves are so brilliantly observed, and because you don't have to have, you can have from 5 minutes to 50 minutes.
Yeah.
They don't overstay their welcome. It's an excellent show.
I'll have to check it out. And it's on Netflix?
The television version's on Netflix, but I think if you just went online, you should be able to find High Maintenance.
High Maintenance. As in H-I-G-H.
Yeah, High Maintenance.
Oh, there's a few guys that are peddling stuff around like that, Sydney. I know that. But
sure
different sort of
Yeah.
company maybe.
Yeah.
All right, let's, I guess, get into it. And there's so many things I want to talk about. So, guys, if you see me referring to my phone, I've got a list of things I want to get stuck into. Notably, your work, what would you say would be your most notable work? It would be HG Nelson, right?
Yes. Look, the Olympics, Roy and HG's Olympics, but I think the Roy and HG duo has been able to ride the bumps and changes in sport quite dramatically, so much so that we feel as though the work we're doing now, which is only on the radio, is as good as anything we've ever done. We're kind of reinventing it all the time, as sport reinvents itself all the time. So we're working now with Macquarie Sports Radio. We're making 2 hours of radio every Saturday morning. We're bookended by Gus Gould talking league, and then the AFL at the other end in the wintertime, obviously the current time, and we're able to talk about the issues of the week. But what's the difference is because we don't have an enormous workload elsewhere, we're spending more time creating the show. So that's a big change for us. Often the work load, it's just too much, and we've been silly about it. But at the moment, we're back to 2 hours of radio, and that's it.
And do you find you were sort of, I guess, when you were at the stage where you had to put out so much content, you were diluting a good product, whereas now you're just getting, like, are you writing what could be spread out over 5 shows condensed into a 2-hour show?
That's an excellent question. What tends to happen is that you foolishly think this is going to be easy, whatever you're doing, and you stretch yourself, you take on extra jobs. When it comes to it, it's less is more. Even though there's probably not as many people listening as in the heyday, the quality talk for us, and I've got to explain, is that the only people who know about what Roy and HG should be doing are John and me. So it's not as though you can go to a rule book and find out. We're the ones who set the agenda, set the bar. And so when it comes to it, we're just very taken by the quality that we're able to produce by doing a lot less. I've got to point out that when we worked on television and made a show on a Saturday night, which was a musical, sort of like a variety show, John would begin writing the following week as soon as we stopped the Saturday night. It's just too much. It's too hard to do that.
It's almost like an ongoing, not so much comedy routine, because the material does come to you with current sporting events.
It does.
But I guess sort of it's like a new like TV show every week. Like you're giving sort of something that's stoking the fire, but then you've got to chuck the fuel on the fire to make it burn, so to speak, and come out with that 2-hour show. Do you find you have the down weeks as well? Or you always find you can come up with something?
Oh, this is incredibly difficult to explain. Okay, my partner gets annoyed with me when I practice HG listening to the car radio. So I put the radio on and listen to what topics they're talking about and try and invent comedy based on that. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter whether it's the news or somebody talking about the state of Donald Trump or somebody talking about trade movements in the AFL. I just respond to that. And I've done that for a very long time. And she says that when I'm not doing all of this, she says I'm a bit of a pain because there's no outlet for it. And we see things all the time in the pattern of work which fire us up to find things that make humour about. So what happens today, for instance, I bought a few things. I thought that couple
of notes. I'll just get you to point that a bit more direct, that mic.
Yeah,
actually.
okay.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it. That's the money right there.
So you asked, for instance, about 5 favourite athletes, and I thought there's no point mentioning athletes from the past.
No, save that to the end.
Oh, okay.
Because there are a few scripted questions, and what we do is we shoot the shit, and then towards the end, because there's more than those athletes as well.
That's all right.
There's more questions than that.
Okay. Well, so looking at sporting things this week.
Yes,
for instance,
this is what we want.
Yeah.
Because I've got a few of these written down myself.
See, I find the weirdest thing about it recently is the role of Toby Green at the GWS Giants.
Yes.
Now, he seems to be, I've never encountered this before, the whole Giants coming through the finals seems to be we bash oppositions and that's how we win. And Toby Green, as they say, walks the line or is on the edge. Sometimes he steps over the edge, but that makes him a great character. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is weird. This team is saying it's going out there to belt the opposition and no one's pulling it up. And I think, wow, this is just incredible. Regardless of whether he does it or not, the idea that they would tolerate, probably because they don't read it because it's mainly in Sydney, in Melbourne, all of this, they would never let another team get away with that.
Yeah, well,
so that's extremely interesting to us that happens.
I suppose it's interesting because then they did send Whitehall, the guy that was quite rough in not last week's game, the game before, and he was suspended last week.
They got Toby Green. That's Toby Green.
Sorry, Toby Green, yes.
Yeah, Toby Green.
So they did eventually slow him up. But is that what you sort of expect to see going up against Richmond with guys like Dustin Martin?
Do you really want to know this? I reckon this goes back to a preliminary final, I think, a while ago when the Tigers were playing the GWS Giants and Dylan Shield got hit by Trent Cotchin.
Yes.
Now, I thought that was red hot. I thought that incident in the state of the game, of course, Richmond supporters won't believe a word I'm saying, but in the state of the game, Cotchin hit Shield, who was the dominant player, the middle centreman, midfielder, and he had to be taken out. Now, it's going to be interesting to see if Green gets away on the weekend, whether the Richmond Rough-Nuts will take action to slow up Green. And that will be a really interesting byplay because these things are all presented as, isn't it great the Giants are there? Isn't it fantastic? We can see the Tigers again. What a great team. But really in playing it, it's much tougher than that.
Yeah.
Much more serious than that.
In a 2010 TED Talk you did, the GWS Giants are obviously the new team, and I'm really citing this back, but it's relevant to me because I only watched it today. You said that and this is taken with a grain, so you said that out in GW, out in Greater Western Sydney, no one really cares about this new team. It's more so the people around the round table in Melbourne, which I believe to be correct. As time's gone on, and it's almost a decade since that comment, do you believe people in Western Sydney will still band around the GWS, or do you think it's everyone that's not a Richmond supporter going, they're the underdogs, I'm just going to jump on that bandwagon?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that I can answer it. There's two ways of looking at it. I think that if there's 100,000 at the MCG on Saturday, if Collingwood was there, about 50,000 would be Collingwood supporters and 50,000 would be obviously Richmond supporters. In the current circumstance, I reckon it could get up to about 75,000 being Richmond supporters and 25,000 being neutrals who usually keep quiet or mad Giants supporters. Coming to the bigger issue, I think that it is extremely difficult to know what will happen with the Giants. For instance, the Suns had a good burst of activity, but now the Suns are in real trouble. So much so that I think they've got now an extra draft pick this year. So that's a big concession, a really big concession from the AFL about how poorly the Suns are going. The Giants have been more, how would it be, more studious in attracting players, in hoovering up players from other teams, as well as hanging on to their own. So they've got a very good team at the moment. What will happen, and the proof will be in the pudding, when they go to the bottom of the AFL ladder again. So I can't tell yet. I would think that
because they had no bad start to the season, the Suns, right, this year.
They had the first 3 matches they won,
and then
they
all
didn't win any more.
It's crazy because they both had the same start. Like, they had an ex-league start. They had Carmichael Hunt go up. GWS had Israel Folau to help him kick. They both had I think they had 5 first-round draft picks, or the 5 first picks for that respective year.
Correct.
What do you think? Was it poor management? And for our international listeners, we're talking about local Australian AFL teams. So what do you think it was? Or is it a culture thing? Because we see it with the Titans too on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, the Gold Coast is how to put it, a problem all of its own in terms of sporting things, because I think people think of it as a part of Australia that's got a lot of people in it, but the people who are attracted there aren't necessarily people who want to play sport as a living.
Yeah.
Remember, because this is all paid sport. It's not as though you end up there by chance and think, just go for a surf and all of a sudden get on the tour. This is professional sport in rugby league and AFL in particular. Where I think the difficulty for them is that there's no culture of this there, unlike even in the Western Sydney, where there's discipline from rugby league, Parramatta, Penrith. They've got Western Sydney Wanderers now, all that sort of stuff. So they've got a lot easier road, because people think, okay, I've got a rough idea of how you get to be good, and when you get to be good, you can earn money, etc. The other thing is, remember, this has got nothing to do with any of this. It's got to do with how television sales are perceived.
That's true.
You and me might sit around and talk a lot about what should happen, but it's never going to happen unless there's money in it for television. So much so that the rules were changed this year in the AFL only, in my way of thinking, because there were so few goals being kicked that they tried to alter the rules to encourage more score so as more ads could be played
in the ad breaks.
Yeah,
but haven't we seen shorter scoring margins in the AFL this year?
It's much closer, but the whole people can correct me, but I think the score is lower than at any time, this is in the matches, than any time since 1952. It's some whopping amount of time that low scoring. Very low scoring. Close games, sure, but low scoring. Close games aren't that interesting to a television station because they go hours without showing an ad.
Yeah, true.
They've got to break that sort of rule if they want to change this. What they like is a lot of goals being scored so they can put the ads in after every goal's being scored.
So coming from a background of mainstream media, which is obviously funded heavily by advertising, I guess for the purity of a sport fan in you, do you think media having this much control of sport, and feel free not to answer this if you feel it's can't put your career in any jeopardy, is a bad thing for sport itself?
There's two big things to understand here. The only way to understand sport today is through the prism of show business. Now, oddly enough, I'm reading the paper today, and there's a commentator who writes for the Sydney Morning Herald who has written for the first time, as nearly as I can tell, that idea in the paper, because that's not a popular view. You understand that everybody's putting on Romeo and Juliet, and they all want to get a good Romeo and they all want to get a good Juliet. There's no variation, so much so that Romeo can go and play for the Melbourne Storm or he can go and play for the Sydney City Roosters. It'll hardly alter anything at all, but they all want a good Romeo, Tybalt, Mercutio. The other bit to understand is that the only way to really get to the nub of it is that society makes an agreement with sport through the media that by having matches on, people like you and me will get interested in sport, so much so that we'll go and do it because this is good for our health. That is madness. You understand?
Yes,
you being in the Cape.
Well, we always try and advertise, and myself to our clients, to our listeners, that's why we get so many athletes on, is for health, the gym can be quite mundane. Not everyone enjoys it. Playing a sport with your mates, kicking a ball around, surfing, swimming, and then not only do you get the aesthetics will come from participating in sport and chasing the ultimate goal of your true athleticism, but you can have your social life around it. And people, that's not to say people don't have their social life around the gym, but yeah, that is a great point, but it's unfortunately not what we're getting out of it.
That's right. So you look at, I remember these London Olympics were big on this. They foolishly got into, it's going to be great for the community. It's going to be great for society. We're going to have lots of people riding bikes and lots of people, as you point out, doing the swimming.
Yeah.
Not crickets.
Many. Yeah.
And so you notice they're whipping this up with the idea of getting the Olympic Games back to Brisbane or southeast Queensland in the relatively near future. And I'm not sure, is it 2032, which I know sounds ages away, but it'll come around pretty quickly. Anyway, their big thing is, again, what a great asset it'll be for the community. But there's no evidence that this works. There's no evidence. And the bit in between that is the bit that makes the money.
Yeah. Figuring that out.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens is the media, equipment makers, professional sport all sit in that weird sliver of space there.
Yeah, it's something that, again, we try and promote. I don't see it ever kicking off again. And I noticed another thing you said in that TED Talk was why events in the Olympics, for example, started. Like, you used to have to run away from something that was trying to kill you. You used to have to throw a spear to kill something for your meal. And now we're in front of screens a lot, hence why we have sports in front of screens.
And esport to our left here,
which is right
it's
here.
dead easy to understand why esports has taken off.
Correct.
Is because people sit in Idaho bombing people in the Middle East.
Yeah, correct.
That's why that's going.
And also I think, and I saw something today, I saw a guy without arms, without legs, competing on a level playing field with able-bodied people. So for esports, it doesn't matter. Black, white, skinny, fat, short, tall, muscly, anything, all even level. And then advertising comes into that.
Well, that's huge.
Huge.
I mean, making the games. I mean, I've always thought, I've always advocated that the, let's say, call it, Call of Duty. Let's say it's up to 15. It may not be up to 15. Anyway, Call of Duty 15, they release it as the Olympic sport.
Yes.
So you have to play this thing that you've got an idea of what it is, so you can train on the others. But they've invented new steps and stuff like that to make it more difficult for you to participate in it. And representatives come from all over the world to play it.
Yes.
And they've got to go to that soon because, as you point out, in the old days, throwing the javelin was a weapon of war. All those weird things like pentathlon, swimming, shooting, running, riding a horse, that sort of thing. Decathlon, the same thing. They're all based on things that originally were beneficial to society. They've lost all of that. Now, of course, the e-sport is where it's taken off.
So what do you think, what's your opinion of esports? Is it something you can see yourself enjoying, or are you just accepting of it as a sports fan? And how do you see things moving forward, let's say another 100 years down the track for the Olympics?
Now that's an excellent question. 100 years in sport is an eon. Is a really long time.
But then if things are just accelerating so fast, so we've seen slow adaptation since the 40s, and then things have sped up with technology, and it's just, there's so many ways to approach it.
Okay, sports come and go. For instance, when there was a big sport called, I want to say, sailboarding. Do you understand that?
Kite surfing almost.
Yeah, kite surfing is the one where you're not restricted to going anywhere. I'm not sure that I'd be able to make. It's like sailboarding was a large surfboard with a sail on it that you drove it around. What's that called? Isn't that weird?
Kite surfing is the one where you have
got
the
kite
up in
and you zoom around.
Fuck, this is gonna kill
me. Don't worry. We'll get to it. Lars Klepich was the big Australian.
Windsurfing.
Yeah. Good on you. Windsurfing. Thanks. Okay.
Huge in the 90s. I just think of wetsuit shorts, fluoro boards, fluoro sails.
Like butterflies going around the water.
Peggy's the south side of Santa Point. They used to love doing that there.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Now, that's died in the bum completely.
Yeah, 100%. Same as kneeboarding. Remember that?
Kneeboarding, yeah. Well, kneeboarding, I think, could make a comeback.
Okay.
Just go back to the problem you've got here. So sport, it's not a continuous trip to the terminus with sport. Some sports are asked to get off the bus and others get on. So when we come to something like kite surfing, I'm reliably informed that kite surfing is now a demonstration sport at the Olympics. And they went to the kite surfing associations and said, it's great you're going to be in the Olympics. And the immortal reply was, and what would the competition be? They have no competition in it. It's a fun thing that goes around. You use the wind, you jump, you do all sorts of things on it, and it's terrific. So it's a completely unregulated sport, like surfing was back in the day.
Yes, correct, which is now part of the Olympics. But it seems like it's almost not too late for surfing, but surfing has hit its peak, stride, same as skateboarding.
I think you're right. I think that the difficulty is that some sport exists outside the mainstream, and deliberately so. And when they come into the mainstream, they struggle a bit because the cachet is we're not like them. We're not them.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
And from all purposes, what I've understood from speaking with guys here in esports athletes is that those guys feel like they've been sort of pushed to the side for so long that they're going to give a big fuck you to mainstream sport and the Olympics when they come knocking, because they already have the masses and they're going to do their own thing.
Okay, now that would be my view, particularly of skateboarding. I mean, I can't remember the swap. I can't remember really. I've surfed for a long time, but I can't remember the moment when it became obvious that it was a mainstream sport. And
so it would have
been a long
been
time ago.
Yeah, it would be around the time like there was the Lords of Dogtown days. We've all
well,
seen that movie. Great film. Peralta, those guys started getting into the competition, and they started bowl skateboarding. But I would say really, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, when that game came out, that's when it was mainstream, because you had kids playing that game and they'd never skateboarded before. They played that game, then they started skateboarding.
I do think also remember, of course, the Olympics reinvented itself in 1896. From ancient Greece to that time, nothing happened. So it's not implausible that it happened again. Coming back to your question, though, of a while ago, which has got to do with how society moves in relationship to invention and creation of things like Facebook or Instagram or the online world, where these things are mushrooming from, coming out from, is if you think that these things are set, they're just not. That in 10 years' time, the things that we think are permanent will have been dissolved and push on artificial intelligence. The idea of what happens when artificial intelligence collides with social media.
Yeah, virtual reality gaming.
Yeah, good on you. Oh, well, there you go.
So we've had Dave Harris on the show here before, and we've spoke about this, and we said I think what's going to happen at the end of this, we'll see a combination between athleticism and gaming, where you're in an arena. Let's say we have a super athletic human. Let's take Usain Bolt, and the game he's in revolves jumping and running fast. He puts on this whole suit, and his abilities are still relevant, but in the suit, it makes them tenfold. So for you or I, we're not as athletic as him. It tenfolds our ability, but then it also tenfolds his ability. So it'll take athleticism, pure athleticism and competency, and times it with what's happening in this game or this suit or this virtual reality. That's where we sort of got talking and where we think sport will end.
That's a really interesting thing. I hadn't developed it quite that far. my thinking, though, is along the lines of the sort of sports that we have at the moment, like let's take rugby league. It's hard to work out how rugby league as a sport can participate in that brave new world that you've just talked about. But one thing that I think can happen is that the experience of somebody sitting on the sideline can be maximised through all the things that you've talked about.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if you wanted to feel like I've got no interest in feeling what it's like to be hit by Sam Burgess, but you could, in fact, develop something where you did get that. Now, this is a weird sidetrack.
Yeah. Oh, mate, that's this podcast.
Yeah, that's all right. So what happens is the Game of Thrones, why did I mention that? Because I got that stuck in my mind. I've always thought Game of Thrones should be a video game or an e-sport.
Oh, they've developed that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's like, and this goes back to like things like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. They all had quite successful video games that went alongside with them, but not on the competitive field of esports.
Sorry, yeah. What I was thinking was taking that as a jumping off point, not as a parallel thing.
Yeah.
So somehow you're moving in this space with obviously all the skills that esports allows, but you're going through this with some information about who these people are.
Yeah, you're making it more interactive with the audience.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's what sports like, have you heard of 2K basketball and like Madden, those sports, they sort of, you can play the characters sort of, not exactly what you're saying, but it gives you more of an idea of the gameplay, the certain structures of each team, the individuality plays of each team. But I guess, moving forward to virtual reality and that sort of thing, it could be crazy.
Now, the next bit is, what does it do to your brain? So all of this
Ask those boys.
Yeah, that's right. All this, yeah, ask those guys. So all this, I bet, is, I shouldn't say this too loudly,
No, they don't care.
but is enabling the brain to do more.
Correct.
You know,
and then also less in a certain degree.
Oh, no, well, they're trapped. They're sitting down all the time.
Correct. So that's part of my role here
is
as
to
the
get 'em
strength
moving.
coach. Get them
Yeah.
moving, which is very hard. Because
Would
they're
be.
something they enjoy and they're there and they might
good
not-
at it.
Yeah, and we're sort of learning now that certain, like example, and not to go on a tangent, having a healthy back can help because you can sit in the chair for a bit longer and it not spasm on you. So all that sort of stuff will transfer over. And I only got asked this question the other week. I forget what it was. I did an interview for an esports magazine and they said, how do we get esports more accepted? And I said, well, we're already seeing it because we get a lot of NRL players in their downtime. It's good for them to play games because they're enjoying themselves. They're sitting down. They're not exerting themselves. But in the other capacity, we need these guys looking more like athletes and taking themselves away from the computer to stay fit and healthy to help their game. That way, one day when they stand side to side with a rugby league guy, for example, hopefully they can look equally as fit. And then the viewer will see and go, that's a pretty athletic specimen. Why do they need to be like that? They might be more intrigued.
Okay, and then you've got to train the brain to be blank.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
this is really tricky
Yes.
because the distraction buggers you whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter if e-sport or playing rugby league. The distraction is death.
Correct.
But then technology won't, as you point out, won't sit here.
No.
It won't sit here. People are looking to ways to divert this and to draw an audience away from these things to other things. Now, I'm a beginner in this because I tend to look at things and wonder what's next without ever getting to the point of inventing something's next. But I
Yeah.
can see how this has got its own pitfalls. So Twitter, Facebook, all those sort of things, which are part of all of this, might as well be hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt
Correct.
because their purchase on society is reducing all the time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's very interesting to see where it's all going to go with the sporting field, and to be honest, no one really knows just yet.
And can I point out that even if you asked me, did this podcast in 20 years' time, we'd be having the same conversation because the things that change
Would it
is
even be
constant.
we'd be probably floating up there.
Yeah, that's right. Change is constant.
Yeah.
Change is constant. So it's like I say, is that the whole thing just moves and bangs on.
Yeah.
And the things that look certain today are probably the quickest things that are going to change.
Yeah, correct. And it's interesting to even think, I hope, in my opinion, that things like the pure events, I think the 100-meter sprint, maybe one or two swim events stick around for the length of time, the marathon. And I think we will because we have that passion to see what's capable for the human body and compare ourselves. And I think we all compare ourselves with Usain Bolt, comparing back against like Linford Christie, Carl Lewis. He's better. We're better than the human race was 20 years ago.
Okay, the sport that I find the most evolving, this is a funny thing to say, is the Premier League in England.
Yes. Very adaptable.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm thinking, wow, now that's got a chance because the whole nature of the sport is so fluid, and what looked as though it was running out of steam a couple of years ago is now charging on at a great rate. And I'm not sure how, I take your point entirely, sorry.
No,
I'm
you're right.
not sure how to sum up what you've said, but some sports will remain, like 100 metres probably, or 400 metres I think is a classic event.
Classic event.
Yeah. So you would have a very limited number. See, I've got to be honest, the pole vault, it's a bit lost on a modern.
I hope sports like that stay with the decathlon because in my opinion, I believe that's the most athletic human on the planet.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's a Frenchman, Kevin Mayer, who has the world record, and he's got a cult following here at the High Performance Podcast. And I hope that
Of two.
but then many, like in France, he's French.
Yeah.
They love track and field over there, and I hope something like that sticks around.
You know, the one thing that the UEFA Championship looks to me like the future of all of that too. Like you have the top teams from the various La Liga, Bundesliga and so on play off. So the Premier League feeds that. Now the Premier League's lucky because it's got so much money, it hoovers up players from all over the place. That may not always be the case. But the UEFA is something like that's the best of the best. So you can see that sort of always existing, even if others drop off, because you've only got so much time in the day to follow all of this.
Correct. So we have saturation, but at the same time, we have more and more population density. So I think maybe there will always be a following for certain sports, and as new ones develop, it's a really fun conversation to have. It's like saying, where does the universe end?
Can I throw in a curveball? China.
Yeah, they're not really into sport just yet, except
Thanks.
e-sport.
Well, are they big in esports?
Okay, so they've started to build stadiums solely like this size, solely for esports. So people leave their homes, they all come to sit in a stadium like we do for AFL here to watch people play computer games.
And will you go and is your ambition to go and cover some of
So
these?
we've covered the Melbourne Esports Open. We've just been down to see what's out. There's guys that are specific to that, like rugby league callers, these guys call esports. And so they've filled out Rod Laver Arena for a whole weekend for various esports. And then they had the online presence is mad, like League of Legends, what these boys play over here. Their world championships are, I think, in Korea next week. And over the course of the weekend, they'll have like maybe 23 million different eyeballs on that game across the weekend.
Wow. And is the game specific to the competition? You know, like I was suggesting, the Olympics have to release, Call of Duty 15 is only that comes out through the Olympics.
So generally speaking, the game's producer. So, for example, Riot Games owns League of Legends, what these guys play. They'll put on the competition. Whereas Blizzard, they own Overwatch. And I believe, and someone's going to crucify me in the chat, they own Call of Duty 2 as well.
That's all right.
So yeah, they own. Yeah, so there's like the people that own the games and develop the games. They'll host these events.
And what happens here is if numbers, like I understand, esports is a whole new strand of activity, but where it comes back to what you're talking about, more like with the 100 meters stay there. Will we get to the point where China says, no, we haven't got any 100 metres run at the moment, let's not have it? Do you know what I mean?
Well, what about even India?
Well, India.
They're the sleeping horse as well.
I know. And they, you'll never believe this, but they're big on shooting. And they were devastated that the shooting in the Commonwealth Games has been almost scrubbed completely.
Yeah.
This goes against what we were saying about earlier about how all sport comes out of war. So shooting's gone from the Commonwealth Games, which reduces their possibilities of medals.
But then now they've picked shooting up in certain CrossFit events.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, it's just crazy what is happening in sport at the moment. So CrossFit is another tangent where they believe they're the fittest on earth. So what started as like cardiovascular exercise mixed in with gymnastics and weightlifting now incorporates, they paddled boards at this year's CrossFit Games as one of the workouts. They did mountain biking at this year's. They invent weird lifting things. So they've picked up in one event, of course it was in Australia because it's pretty illegal to just give someone a gun without a license, where of course in America that's no issue. So over there they said, all right, people would have watched this and say something with the event list, but let's say they ran 1500, they had to do 50 clean and jerks at a certain weight, then they had to shoot a rifle at clay pigeons, hit a certain amount of targets, drop that, jump in the pool and swim.
Right.
So maybe we'll see Indians in that soon.
Right, so X Games has moved. Is that taken up?
No, so X Games, skateboarding, surfing, all that. This is CrossFit. So this is a sport you might see people do at a gym. And it's like if they're doing quite a lot of things radically, like a clean and jerk, like a ring muscle up, which we see in gymnastics, but for repetitions and they're timing it, that's basically CrossFit. So that's
Do you get people come to you and ask whether you can train me for this?
I am more of a fitness purist in the sense I don't hate CrossFit, but I don't think you should be doing some of those movements as fast as you can because it becomes dangerous to a degree. And I think there's better equipped coaches to instruct that than me.
Yeah, sure.
So then there's another sport, CrossFit.
Yeah, see, the fracturing of, like when I was a kid, all you had was football in the winter, AFL, and cricket in the summer. That's all you had.
Correct.
You could play tennis, but tennis seemed to go nowhere, and it was a sort of tricky one to pay for the court, and who would ever do that? But then, of course, other games got traction because of international competition like hockey and, like...
Well, then in the basketball in
was
the
a big
90s
thing.
when Luke Longley was the number one draft pick.
And then, so now that's exponential now. It's rapidly changing, as you point out. So X Games, I've sort of lost X Games, and now CrossFit
Yeah.
that you're talking about. So they're inventing all these things all the time.
And it's mad. And that's what, again, going back to our original point, sport used to be to encourage the average person to do sport. That's what's great about CrossFit. And that's the thing I really like about CrossFit is it's so communal and it's so encouraging. So you can go to a CrossFit gym and participate and do their entry-level workouts and then try and work your way up the chain and really compare yourself to these elite guys.
Now, in the old days, would those people have gone to triathlon?
That's a hard one. So we've got a lot of guys. One guy who's come from Ironman. One guy's come from downhill mountain biking. One of our guys, Ricky Garrard, was a league guy. He played a bit with the junior Canberra Raiders. In America, there's a lot of guys that came from football, and it gives them something to pick up their competitive career when they realise they haven't made it professionally in their sport.
And is it professional? Is the circuit
Yeah,
professional?
you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even in Australia, you can make a decent living. Like way more than Ironman, what we were talking about here.
Before.
Another sport that's really tanked, unfortunately.
Yeah, so they don't all stay there, the sports. They move around. Like, obviously, you need a fair bit of effort to keep... we were lucky sometimes, and it's got to do with often parental enthusiasms too that keeps the sport going.
Yes.
I remember there's, I think I want to say Jessica Fox is a key...
Yes, the kayaker and
well done,
canoer.
well done, canoer. Now, her parents are gun kayakers
Yes.
and canoers, so it's hard to escape that sort of influence because she
Correct.
was there where they were racing and thought, why don't I do this?
Yeah.
So it's good like that.
And that rubs off. Well, even I've read Kobe Bryant's book, and he was the same. His dad was a bit of a renegade, got kicked out of Philadelphia. He went to Italy to play, and he was started off cleaning the court when he was 5, and then he just was always around the court. So he's like, I'm here, I might as well shoot balls.
Yes.
And then got obsessed and developed into the Kobe Bryant we know. So look, in the end, this has been a very interesting conversation for the first 40 minutes of the episode. But it's, I guess, to summarize it, we have no idea where sport's going, and no one does. And if you do, you're going to be very wealthy.
Correct. But the other thing is not to get too...
Attached to a sport?
Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
The thing is, or you can be attached to a sport, but the big changes are watch for those sports that turn into work. So I remember ages ago that thinking, well, when we started a long time ago, we always amazed Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs were a big, gun team in those days. And we thought, how, if we had to do this, what they do, we'd just walk away from it after about an hour.
Yeah.
Because the repetition, the stupid, endless repetition, the practice over and over again, same as these guys here today, different sort of thing. I just don't have the discipline to do it. I can do the work that I do, but I just don't have the discipline to do that. And we thought it was amazing, and we thought the two things about it, there must be some sort of sense of fun in it for them to gather together.
And do that.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, like CrossFit, that it's a kind of community thing. I'm always told that triathletes have that same sort of thing because it's such a stupid event.
Yeah,
no,
just
offense.
painful.
Painful,
The
that's
whole
right.
time, pain. We've interviewed Tim Van Berkel, and he's a good friend of the show, and he's done the Kona Ironman multiple times.
Whee!
And he told some amazing stories, just like qualifying for Kona through the Asia Pacific region, and he's like got shit running down his legs because he's exerted himself 330 watts on the bike for 180 Ks, and then he jumps off for the marathon, and he's like, I'm in third place here, fourth place is cut off, I'll just shit myself. And it's like, why would he want to do that? Like, but then going back to what you said, it's some sense of fun and obviously extreme achievement. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even begin to imagine that sense of achievement. Like, even doing little things at the gym and hitting little personal goals feels amazing. But to do that must be the driving force.
And can I just put all that on pause for a minute and say the flip side is I didn't realise how much thought goes into, say, swimming.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. So this is all, a person who swims terribly. And the varieties of styles and techniques
Yeah.
of swimming and the thought that's gone into it is just incredible.
Yes.
I knew Murray Rose a bit through work, the famous Australian swimmer, and there's a great video of him learning a new way of kicking very late in his life. And I thought, wow, look at this. This is really weird that you would think it's something that he's mastered at a certain point and then just gone on with it. But the evolution of swimming is just incredible.
Insane. Well, there you go.
Yeah,
Even
there you
think
go.
about the
Tiny
suits,
bits.
and even Eamon Sullivan was the person I can think of. He had a really straight arm style. Like, he'd just fling his arms over. It didn't look particularly nice to watch. Whereas you look at Alain Bernard, the Frenchman, and Cesar Cielo, who were sort of his main rivals at the time. Cesar still owns I believe the 50 and 100 meter world records, and they're a lot smoother, like high elbows, whereas Eamon was just throwing his shoulders over. So there's a few different ways. And then look at Michael Johnson versus Bolt in terms of running.
Oh, I know.
In Michael Johnson
so
in extreme
upright.
extension, and Bolt a lot more relaxed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and the thing that where they study somebody like Popov, who's a big dominant figure, and developed a whole technique of swimming based on what he does. It's all these things, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and that's another thing, and I'm sure you've seen it over the years, like you've interviewed way more athletes than Angus and I, is you start to learn what it takes for that particular person to do this event, and then you interview a rival, and then you learn and then you buy in because you're like, ooh, now I know what it takes to get to that level, and I also know what he does different to him, and you start to get a lot more enjoyment out of the sport, even though prior to that you might have had nothing to do with it.
And I've got to say, the great thing was for us was in the Summer Games of 2000, the Sydney Games, was to invent coverage of sport that made it interesting or gave other people a way into it. The classic, of course, being the gymnastics.
Yes, and you guys did an amazing job. And let's talk about that because it must have been such an amazing experience in your life. What was the highlight of the game? I guess two questions. What do you think's the bit that's lived on? I think it's got to be the gymnastics. And then what was your highlight of the 2000 Olympics?
Okay, well, the gymnastics is a great story in itself, and if I can come to it, quickly, was that Seven, for some reason, weren't big on putting long form gymnastics to air because it's very time consuming and there's a lot of participants, and so you can't cover it when you've got the 100 metres and the Kathy Freeman and so on. So they asked us to put in some time on the gymnastics, and we looked at it and we thought, we can't do this. We can't make this interesting. It's too arcane. It's too technical. You have to know how this works in terms of the scoring and why are they repeating these things and stuff like that. Anyway, somebody told us, whether this is true or not, that a lot of the terms of the gymnastics are based on the people who introduce that move into competition.
Okay.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, the Oscar
so
they invented it.
Yeah, that's right. They brought it to the competition. So he thought, oh, well, hang on a minute. If all of it's made up and isn't descriptive, why don't we make up a whole new set of terms?
Yes.
And that was the breakthrough that we got. So the battered salve, the hello boys.
The hello boys is all time.
Yeah, all the Dutch wink, all this sort of stuff. That was invented because there were no constraints. Now, first up, what happened was the officialdom reeled back in horror. Yeah. Because we just presented it as a fait accompli. We had a couple of
As in like the officials of the sport? Or
the officials of the sport. And probably Olympic. I suspect Olympic gymnastics is very conservative. This may be entirely wrong, but a fairly conservative group. Anyway, they just thought, oh, this is going too far. So that spurred us on. Yes. A bit like, you're saying about the skateboarders. Yeah. So as we got more confident, we were able to spend more time doing it and invent more things that are added on. So without doubt, that's the great thing that people remember. But the bit that was my favourite completely, without, really thinking about it at the time, this is a bit hard to explain, but there's diving competition. And so we invented this mascot bomb-off, which obviously had Fatso, Sid Ollie and Dickhead and the boxing kangaroo. Yes. The key things that we did were cover it exactly as the diving competition was covered, meaning they dropped the camera so as you go down with the diver at the same rate. Yes. And they had Drew Morford, who's sadly no longer with us, and Stephen Foley as the commentators, and we got them to do it. Okay. We didn't have much to do with it. The producers and directors put it together. But I thought, wow, look at that. That is so great.
And you orchestrated that, behind the scenes.
We gave the platform or the proscenium for that to exist. So as the mascot, obviously we filled Fatso up with lead shots, so we made the biggest splash and all that sort of stuff. But the commentary, the technology that we adopted to use at the pattern of the competition was something that really stands out.
And it's genius because it was the most entertaining game, and then moving forward to the 2002, I believe, Winter Olympics, the same thing, because it was something that Australians, I think we had so much involvement because it was in our own country. We had Kathy Freeman. We had such a golden era of swimming at our doorstep. And then obviously the Stephen Bradbury thing, having you guys over there.
We're lucky there.
It was a perfect sort of backup from the 2000 Olympics.
The Bradbury thing is really big. Obviously a symbolic thing. As I understand it, we were lucky because, and I'm not sure if this is right or not, that Seven's coverage of that was somehow it's got to do with how the Olympics coverages work. They trade things because not everybody can cover all the things all the time. So they traded our call of Stephen Bradbury's brilliant win in controversial circumstances to other countries. And so we got a lot of exposure in other places because our call was the one that they heard.
And does it make you think, like, do you wish back then now you would have had the reach that you could have now with social media? Like, so imagine that. See, now people from overseas can access you directly on Instagram, on Twitter, that sort of thing. I always think, like, that situation on such a big scene, it could have just been, it was big, but it could have been insane.
Yeah. Okay, here's a few things on that. They think they'll never get the ratings that they got for our final show at 1:45 on a Saturday night ever again.
I agree.
Yeah,
People have way too many things to do now as well.
Right.
No one has that time to sit down together.
And it was
what were the ratings?
I've got no idea. I can't remember.
They'd should be millions.
So what happens is that and by then we'd worked out you can't be kings of all the cities.
Yeah.
Even though it looks as though you can't be. It requires enormous effort and enormous, way more resources than we've got to be kings of more than cities in Australia. The other thing was that we had a very strong suit of is you need to be here to understand this. You need to be here to understand the tradition of humour in Australian sport, which we didn't invent. I mean, we just capitalised on it. We're the next cab off the rank, a bit like what you're doing here. So it's impossible to reproduce that.
That's a good point.
You had to develop the Olympics. You had to have, Addo Bolden come here and talk about the 45-step ballet and the gun guys from America running the 100.
Maurice Green. You guys had him lit up after your interview. He was laughing hard.
And all that thing that we never realised they'd come the year before and that they'd stayed in Coogee and worked out that this would be they leave nothing to chance. And he loved Tim Tams and some sort of ice cream, which I forget, like a gay time or something like that ice cream. And that was what they liked about Australia and remembered about Australia and brought them back. Anyway, all those things were of the moment. And so, never mind, this is really hard because the mistake a lot of people make is they want to reproduce that moment, not realising
you don't have the right scenario.
You don't. You don't have that opportunity. Luck plays such a big part.
And that's what's such a beautiful thing about memories.
Indeed.
You can enjoy it for what it is.
And I've got to remind myself is that there'll be a big nostalgia about that. My advice is to keep going.
Yeah.
The best moments are still, and even if we don't get any great moments, the best moments are still ahead of you.
Yeah.
For everybody.
For sure.
You can't think, well, I wish it was like that again. It will never be like that again. And I remember, I know people say this is a bit odd, but I can remember being in Athens and going to the games at night. The studio was very close to where the bit like between here to there, and they had 400 metres hurdle where Jana Pittman was running for Australia, but the Greek runner was the key hope of the Greek nation in the 400 metres hurdle. And I remember being there and seeing this race go round with the roar of the Greek crowd and the sort of enthusiasm, the whole thing, and you didn't watch it as a continuous event, you watched it as sort of clunks. So you clunk, it's a bit hard to explain why this happens, but you clunk here and then all of a sudden there, now it's there, now, she's won.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that night, they had pole vault and other things going on. I thought, I've had enough, I'll go home. Anyway, walking out thinking, this moment will never happen for me again. Profound moment. It's like sometimes people probably come to the event here on the weekend, Storm v Roosters, and they walk away, let's say the Roosters win, and they win by a point or something like that, and they walk away deliriously happy, and they think, I'm not sure that'll happen again for me, quite like that, because it goes on, but those moments are all you get.
Hence breeds hope.
Yes, really good.
Moving
Really
forward.
good.
And a question one of our fans wrote is, I'm just going to grab my phone.
Yeah, do it.
It's relevant to this. Where are we? Sorry, I got to scroll through. If I can... God, I got a lot here. Will you and Roy be returning for an Olympic special in 2020?
Well, we live in hope.
I think Australia does.
Well, we remember we have to... Somebody has to stump up the money to do it.
Correct.
And provide the circumstances. And we're hopeful that we will make some sort of program which has a lot of Olympic content. It'll all be over by this time next year for the Olympics. But how it works, where it works, what it works...
Hey,
and
Twitch.
Oh,
it's
no,
a
there
free
you go.
platform.
There you go.
You can do it from your house, and they'll probably buy the rights to the Olympics. They've already bought the rights to the reserve grade of the NBA, so you can commentate on games.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, that's just something. One thing that's beaten us lately in all of this stuff is the changing technology. I always thought that would be the future, whereby somebody buys the rights and puts it up and allows us to commentate on it and create a show around it. Would be online, would be the future. But this requires, politics and business to...
Correct. They're beyond... Unless you want to get involved.
No, I don't.
It's very much beyond the
normal-
commoner in that
Yes, that's right.
in that scenario.
That's right. You would, for instance, the patterns of activity often involve people wanting us to do things which then they'll go and sell. And we think, we've agreed to do this with no certain outcome. So we tend to hang back a bit and be sure that there's a certain outcome. But on the other hand, I've got to say, since the 2004, we have covered the games on radio and odd sort of programs, like we did 2012 in London for the Project on Channel 10.
Yeah.
We did the Winter Olympics on Channel 10 and Samsung platform on the phones. And so it does come along in that sort of way.
Well, if we get a ton of revenue in the next year, maybe we'll do it for the High Performance Podcast.
Yeah, okay.
If we're not there ourselves. Okay.
Yeah, I hope you get there yourselves.
Like you said, there's plenty of Olympics, so one day we will. Let's get into our scripted questions. And the first one you have, your 5 favourite athletes of all time.
Okay. Well, obviously, Roy, people forget how many international matches he played in rugby league. I think he ran on in 156 tests. He's state of origin, obviously. The Lithgow Shamrocks, record holder of games.
Dan Thomas from the gym is a Lithgow boy. He'll be happy to hear that.
387 matches for the Lithgow Shamrocks. Look, there's so much to go through, and I don't want to dwell on it. Rooting King, obviously, an incredible athlete, equine athlete, probably the greatest horse Australia's ever seen.
Okay, that's the second equine athlete we've ever had. We had Landau.
Oh, yes.
Am I saying it right?
I think so.
And that was from, oh my God. Fuck, this is going to kill me. Jordan, he's the hitter from Tassie for the Sydney Sixers.
Right.
Oh fuck, he's a great guy. Oh, this is going to kill me. Anyway.
Don't worry.
But he had Landau, so I'm happy to hear that.
Now, obviously, Rooting King does most of his best work in the mounting enclosure these days, but I still think if officialdom weren't so blinkered, they'd let him run in the slipper, and my dream, of course, he does the slipper Melbourne Cup double.
You're a big punting fan, aren't you?
I am, and imagine a horse... it's a 2-year-old and then turns 3 and wins the cup. I mean, does the slipper as a 2-year-old and turns 3 and wins the cup. I mean, it's a dream come true. Then, of course, we have to remember, of course, that there's been so many athletes around. And I've got to say again, we have to come to the problem of show business. Unless people do really stupid things, no one's going to write them up because there's nothing to say about Roger Federer winning matches. I'm telling you, as a person who tries to find things to say about Roger Federer winning matches, that's what he's meant to do. But Nick Kyrgios, obviously the showman, has brought so much of that special je ne sais quoi to tennis.
So you're a fan?
I'm a big fan, but my only thing is officialdom should, if he breaks a racket, force him to play with it. This is a simple thing. I'd love to see him play with some of those rackets, he buggers, because it's just ridiculous. And he should be forced to play on no change of the racket, Nick, sadly.
So I see him as it's passion.
Passion, that's right, passion. Passion for tennis.
I think passion, and then the media aggravate him. That's what I see from Kyrgios.
It doesn't matter that he never plays again. Right now, he's a great well, I was going to say ambassador isn't quite the right word, but he's a great figure in the world of tennis.
You need that villain.
You do. So when I was a kid, McEnroe and Connors were the big, who pioneered this sort of tennis, this sort of distorting or disrupting the opponent and distorting the game to suit their purposes. And I always had a soft spot for Agassi. I mean, they're players who probably are lost now a bit in the shuffle, but they're great contributors to, and people, if you want to read a good book about sport, Agassi's biography is an excellent book. Sam Burgess, obviously.
You're a South fan?
No, I'm not. No, Parramatta fan.
Oh, that was a rough week last week.
Yeah, it was a rough week, but then the week before was really good.
Yeah, great week.
Now, so Sam Burgess again, because this week he's been able to draw the attention to rugby league in the most attractive way. And I've got to say is the idea that I think in the match this weekend, South v Raiders, is it 8 English players are playing?
Oh, really? Because
is he the
hooker that's British from Canberra?
Yes, I think that's right. And they have 3 other players who come from England.
Wow.
So they've got a big English component, English flavour to the game.
So we might get some views from over there.
Well, probably you will, but can I point out what's happened to Australian Rugby League? That we have to get English players to fill all these spots.
Correct.
And especially a team like the Raiders. I mean, let's not forget they gave us Duggan and Ferguson. I mean, you can't get any
2 of the great renegades.
That's right.
And also you could say Carney grew up in Goulburn, so they slipped us him as well.
That's right. The rooftop 2, Duggan and Ferguson.
And then they also gave us, going back to CrossFit, our deranged CrossFit athlete Ricky Garrard, who tested positive for drugs at the CrossFit Games in 2016 after coming 3rd. So what's going on out there?
Oh, that's incredible. I just
it's
realised.
Funny.
Yeah. Okay, and finally, for me, 5, I put in Toby Green, who's got the Golden Grub of the Year 2 years in a row. Very hard to get it once, let alone 2 years in a row. And why does he keep doing that weird work near people's eyes?
Why did John Hopewadi stick his fingers up people's eyes? It's something, and we'll remember him for it.
Exactly.
I like that top 5.
Yeah.
And is that the top 5 lifetime or just for now, do you think?
Well, the difficulty is, and I've got to be mindful here, if I say certain players, then you people would just scratch their heads. So, and remember, of course, we consider ourselves experts on what happened this week.
Yes,
in
correct.
Sport. We don't consider ourselves what happened on the previous week. This is because you cannot hope to anticipate what will happen between now and next week. These, Toby Green, Nick Kyrgios and Sam Burgess all might retire, and therefore they're just lost to us. So we have to find
Stay
people.
in the now.
Stay in the now, that's right. So what happens is the sense of entertainment is always now. There's no point thinking about, I'm a bit disappointed with the way that the AFL Grand Finals turned out, but I can't do anything about that.
You live in the now. You chuck Toby Green in the fire.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's exactly right.
I thought with the Carlton hat, I was expecting Bruce Doull, the flying doormat, to be thrown in there.
Yeah, but the difficulty with...
he was Carlton, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem there.
Luke Longley taught us that.
And I've got to say is that I can remember seeing him play, and he's one of the few players who I ever saw able to do this, which is a fundamental skill, is you're the attacker, he's always a defender.
Yeah.
He can run towards you and make you drop the ball or move the ball simply by looking at you.
He's an intense-looking character.
Intense. And then he had that other great skill was he read where the ball was from where you were and could do that to it as the ball came towards you.
He just knew. Skill. Bruce Doull highlights, guys. Look it up. All right, HG, next question. And there's another 4 now, and we don't prep any of our guests for these. And I'm just trying to think in the order in which I'll ask these. And the next one will just be a simple one. What's your party trick?
Wow, what a good question that is.
We got some. Don't worry about that.
No, I'm sure you did.
These are what make our show iconic, I think.
Okay.
Iconic's the wrong word.
Famous party trick is fancy dress. I always go as Roy.
That's
very,
a good one.
Very simple to dress as Roy. And because people now only think of Roy and HG as Roy. It drives me nuts.
Really?
Yeah, they don't see HG at all. They just see Roy. So as when I get down, you might have noticed on the way here, for instance, somebody shouted out, "Hey, Roy."
Really? Was that bloke that told us to go to the Banksy thing?
Yeah, that's
I should have
right.
told him to get fucked.
Yeah.
So I only know HG. I was having this conversation in the gym this morning. Maybe it's because you're around.
Anyway, so what happens is I go as Roy and people think, it's HG.
That's
so
pretty
it
funny.
Work. Really weird.
I like that.
Anyway, so that's me party trick.
Yeah,
remember, of course, is that the idea of the party trick is long-windedness. It's not
correct.
a valuable trick.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. All right, the next one is what's your biggest regret?
Oh, right. Now this is I mean,
Actually, sorry, I should rephrase this on. You know the artist Sher?
yeah.
It's the question is if it's the Sher challenge. If I could turn back time.
If you could turn back
What?
time.
So that's
yeah.
sorry, I phrased that wrong. That's the question.
Apart from punting,
Yes.
regret. So you allowed punting
Yeah,
regrets.
well, our listeners are mainly 18 to 30. They love
okay.
punting regrets.
Okay. My ability to pick fourths is my biggest regret. If you want to know what's
Is
going to
that
run
saying
fourths,
you can regret though? Because you can't change it.
no. But what I mean is, no, that's true. But I regret this ability, this uncanny gift that I've got to pick
Yeah.
fourths.
Sounds like Wade Campbell at the gym, if you ask me.
The two things that I do is I bet Quinellas or each way.
Yeah.
And if you bet each way or even in Quinellas, getting fourths is no help. But I can get them.
You can get 'em.
I can get them. I was trying to think of a more, philosophical sort of answer to this
Oh,
question.
no need.
No. Okay, good on you.
If that's
Okay.
it, that's it. Angus
okay.
and I don't go too deep. And our rule is if usually we get athletes on and they're quite relaxed. It's funny because coaches and media people always have something they regret, whereas athletes are like, oh, I don't need anything to change. And if they say that, Angus and I have to tell them something we regret. And the list is long. The list is long.
I was going to say the regrets are things like, oh, I wish I said that. Now you're going to ask me, well, like what? Well, I can't remember anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's another regret. So
Yes,
it's stacking them up now.
yeah. Good.
But there are moments where I thought, But of course, what happens there is I've said so many great things at the moment, opposite things at the moment, that they tend to roll over the ones which I
Yes,
miss.
yes.
Whereas people say, oh, I wish I thought of saying that. Well,
Yeah.
you'll get a chance to say it.
Correct. Well, that might roll into our next question, and I hope you're a fan of the rap game, and we're talking about music here, because if you could have any rap artist rap about you, who would it be, and what would they say?
Right. Well...
Do you know any rap artists, HG?
Well, 50 Cent's coming, I notice. And,
Yes, yeah.
You know...
Well, he's actually on the way out.
Hey?
He's on the way. He's like...
no, he's minor. He's
yes, yeah.
They're more interesting. Sometimes musicians are much more interesting when they're in the shadow of their career,
Correct,
rather than they're on the rise.
Well, he's a real businessman now.
Right, that's good.
Yeah, he owns he did own Vitamin Water. Yeah, so he went from supposedly shooting people to that.
Right. I always thought Tupac was great. Again,
Yes.
sadly
Rest
on the
in
way
peace.
out. Yeah, rest in peace. And then, of course, the great Death Row Records
Yes.
roster, which is,
Was good.
Yeah, well, it was good. So what happens here is that I've got real trouble being in the room with that volume and noise and bottom end, I know this sounds really weak, but I do find it disturbing, not because of what they're saying, but just the volume.
How loud it is?
Yeah, how loud it is.
I
and
can
the
appreciate
bottom
that.
end, the bottom end is crushing, and so I can't get away and be in it. But I do like, back in the day, De La Soul. Yeah. So, and what it comes to what they're saying about it, I reckon their thing was he's a joke.
I like it. A lot of diss tracks come from the rap game.
Yeah.
So that'd be easy.
Yeah,
but maybe
it
with
is
a
a
bit of
joke.
humour in there.
Well, De La Soul, I love the idea that where I got really pissed off was Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, you don't like Rage?
No.
I was only listening to him when
Oh,
you came over to me in the gym. What annoys you about Rage?
Well, it's such a muscled idea that you join these two things together.
Correct. Political rock.
Yeah,
and a bit of rap there
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
Zach
Yes,
De La
that's
Rocca.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I thought that's not very bright. If I go back to the roots of it, the idea that you played a record player,
Yes.
that was genius.
Yeah.
You know, that to see that and
For DJing at the purest form.
that's right.
Yeah,
correct.
and then that was the beat.
scratching-
Yes.
That's right. So I like the idea that when they went from they adapted the soul into the rap. To take metal or like much more machine-made music, like hitting guitars, into it, just
Ruined
felt
it
to
for
me.
you.
Well, it doesn't ruin it for me. It
It
doesn't.
just wasn't your thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
nice. No, I like that. I like that. All right, and then the last question is, if you're on death row, what would be your last meal?
Right. What a good question this is. Well, I reckon because I hardly ever eat it, I'd have tofu and salad.
Tofu and salad.
Yeah.
What's your go-to meal?
Well, my go-to meal is really chicken and vegetables.
Healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of the bodybuilders we've had on the show.
Oh, right.
Chicken and vegetables, very easy to track the macronutrients in there.
Oh, isn't that good?
Yeah, very.
Okay, probably, like if I thought positively about death,
Yeah.
the lighter I am heading there, the better.
Yeah, correct.
Because I smell burning.
Yeah, correct. All right, we've got a few fan questions, then we'll get you out of here. And again,
Okay.
I really appreciate your time. So we've answered that. Do you know H.G. Nelson is a very famous Spanish Minecraft player? So Minecraft is a computer name. So H.G. Nelson, did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. That's
so
great.
just punch H.G. Nelson into YouTube.
And you get Minecraft.
You'll get yourself,
Yeah.
but you'll also get him.
Right,
And I have no idea what he's saying. So Minecraft is a game that stood the test of time,
and
actually.
people watch people playing that,
Correct,
don't they?
on this platform that we're on Twitch.
Yeah.
So someone might have they might have H.G. Nelson on Minecraft on Twitch, then they might have H.G. Nelson on the High Performance Podcast on the other screen.
Yeah, right, a good idea.
So you have to look him up.
Yeah, I only know this because one of my mates in England has young kids who play this. No, they don't play it. They watch people playing
Minecraft, yeah.
And I look at them and I think,
it's a painful game, in my opinion. There's not much reward in Minecraft.
well, imagine watching people play it.
Oh,
if there's not much
yeah. It's hell. There's games I like watching,
Yeah.
but Minecraft's not one. Okay, and what do you think about the whole cancel culture we're seeing at the moment that ties in with, like, I guess comedians are quite prevalent now. A lot of them are getting, like, kicked off Saturday Night Live for things they might say. Do you think we've become a bit sensitive?
Okay, what an interesting question this is, and how long have we got? I think that people are interested in, like, you mean like Justin Trudeau's obviously in the gun at the moment.
Yes,
Yeah,
for
perfect.
blackface,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah. Look, it is extremely difficult if people are going to remember what happened a long time ago and mount an argument one way or the other on it. If I thought about the world of art, we'd look at very few things. Having said that, though, I think it's important that people are taken to these moments in the past and the ideas of now are pointed out through it. In other words, to get out a squee camera and bash Justin Trudeau over the head with it, it doesn't seem to be particularly helpful because he's changed and you've changed. Where I think it's more interesting is to say this is no longer acceptable. So when it comes to a discussion, where I think of is, you can go back through time and look at any sort of culture and you'll be surprised how disappointing these people are.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So what happens is now is some people deserve to be belted, but it's got to be seen from the point of today. It can't be seen of the point of 20 years ago.
Correct. No, that's a very good way of looking at it.
So,
Angus and I like to think of ourselves as not super sensitive, and obviously we get away with a lot of shit we say on the show. Not that we think we offend anyone or many people.
And remember, of course, you're meant to change. You're not meant to stay as you were 20 years ago.
Correct.
You're meant to move on and the tempo of the times and take on board new ideas and new things and new patterns of behaviour. What I thought was really revealing, if I can go to the reverse of cancel culture, is the response to Greta's speech at the United Nations from people, men my age. I just thought that was ridiculous.
They sort of give it to her a bit and say it was wrong. Yeah.
They do. They've got no idea of what they're buying into.
Correct. No,
So
that's
the way I'd see it.
Yeah, and it's also funny, and this is why I assume having that, I guess that's the way that you are. You're constantly adapting is why you guys are still so relevant today. Like, I have conversations with people like yourself, and we can talk about the exact same things and agree and see eye to eye. But then someone who hasn't adapted over the years, your same age, and they'll just disagree with everything I say. And it's interesting to sort of see that, and it makes you so much more relatable no matter what the age. Whereas those people, you just don't want to spend time with them.
Okay, now this is a really interesting thing. I'm not sure when I noticed this the first time, but I realised that in technology, when we came to the rapid change of technology now, people my age had exactly the same relationship as people in their teenage years at that time. Experience is different, but your understanding of how the internet works and so on. So the conversation jumps across the age gap. if you stop at any point, that's where you get written off.
Yeah.
You've got to keep changing and realising that tomorrow's teenagers will be just as disruptive, just as annoying and just as enjoyable as
Correct.
today's teenagers. And so that's where you kind of see that the world can go on. If you look at it from a stuck point of view, then you're going to have a miserable time.
Definitely. And I even see it, like I'm nearing 30 and I see on Facebook what people post example about rap culture. They're like, oh, rap was so much better 10 years ago. I hate this. I can't believe people listen to this. Cram it down people's throats that it's bad. Condemn anyone that listens to it. And you just don't want to know those people anymore. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting to an age where when my parents were saying that music that you're listening to isn't good, this music's better, that annoyed me. They're doing that to the younger generation now. And it's just, you're better off just going with the flow.
It's not so much going with the flow, it's being actively engaged by the change. In other words,
That's a good way to put it. Much better way to put it.
Yeah. You see, I'm not a great fan of Taylor Swift, but
neither am I.
I don't care.
You can understand why people might enjoy it, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of what's happened to Taylor Swift in the last fortnight, where she was coming to the Cup and now not coming to the Cup. That's a huge story.
Yes.
And I love all of that because here it collides these two things that I talk about all the time.
People that love Taylor Swift because they're young, but people that hate her because she's supporting horses supposedly being bashed.
Well done. Okay, and then the next thing is there was obviously a show business involvement there.
Yeah.
I suspect the show business arrangement went sour.
And then this is to blame.
Correct.
Fuck, I love these conspiracies, HG. All right, we got one more and then we'll get you out of here. Have you ever, and this is, I guess, tying on for what we just spoke about, have you ever had anyone take harsh offence to anything you've said?
Oh, yes, people all the time. People all the time, they say, they hate what we do. They say we're un-Australian. Australia's not like that. We don't come from that part of Australia all the time. And in fact, most of the time, I'm philosophical about it. You can't please all the people all the time. If you can please enough that makes you get another go round or another contract or whatever it is, that's all you have to do. If you please all the people all the time, you're sort of not doing your job, because all these things that we're talking about, disruption is not an easy thing to have and not have. You have it. We're going through a phase of massive disruption all the time. I always say, if you're worried about disruption, wait till we kill the barrier reef. Then you'll see disruption.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's got to keep going, and the whole thing is to try and understand what's happening now, and tomorrow try and understand what's happening then.
Life's all about evolution.
It is.
There you go.
And can I point out that
Yes.
I'm a great fan of things from the past, and you realise how similar things were in the past to today, and how difficult it is to pick a point where it stops. And if you pick a point where it stops, you've stopped.
Yes. Very philosophical note on this podcast. But anything you've got upcoming that you need the punters that are listening or watching will listen to come
We make radio every Saturday morning, Roy and HG, called Just Short of a Length on Sports Radio, Macquarie Sports Radio, and they have a podcast which is put up usual places to find the podcast, which is put up half an hour after we finish.
Oh, that's a quick turnaround. Much quicker than here at the High Performance Podcast. We got a back catalogue. We are here live on Twitch. And look, it's actually been a great honour to have you on the show, HG. You're a guy Angus and myself grew up watching, having a laugh with, really like when we're at the peak of our sports fandom as kids. And I guess someone we look to, to guidance of where we want this show to go. And we want to bring that enjoyment to sport to our listeners and just to someone that might not even be into sport.
Well, we always imagined that there was two audiences we got. People who never were interested in sport. We aimed and thought about them and tried to lure them in. And the people who were watching the rugby league and somebody knocks on the front door, so they immediately turn off the television and go and answer the door, and they sit around and have the cup of tea. And then the question is asked, wonder what's happening in the league. So back it goes on.
Nice.
They're the two audiences that we thought if we could get them to listen, we'd be lucky and be able to continue in what we're doing.
Well, then it turned out all right.
And good luck with your program here. It's an admirable and great adaptation of, if I was your age, I'd be doing what you're doing.
Well, look, I'm glad to hear that we're heading in the right direction in your eyes. And There you go, guys. So this will be out. Well, this is out now on Twitch, and if you're listening on the podcast, it's already out. Make sure you check out HG's show, and stick around. Might be something happening next year at the Tokyo Olympics.
Yes, we'll keep our fingers crossed for the Tokyo Olympics. And the one thing there is again, you've got no idea what's going to happen.
Correct.
You've no idea at all what's going to happen. It's just remarkable.
Anyway, only time will tell. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.